So I've been debating, what do I start with? Like, do I start with a hot take? Do I start with something really useful? Do I start with something that's underestimated? I'm going to start with something really useful that I think every sender should be doing. It's basically using this tool called Google Postmaster Tools. So I'm really annoyed at ChatGPT because I used to say GPT and people in the industry knew that I meant Google Postmaster Tools. Now they think I talk about the chat, and I haven't found a better way to talk about it, so I'm forced to use the long name. So Google Postmaster Tools is a free suite of monitoring offered by Google. So broadly speaking, working in the industry for so long, we found that, roughly give or take 80% of people use Gmail addresses or Google Workspace emails. And so when you look at Google Postmaster Tools, that's going to give you like a pretty good pulse on like what's going on with your emails. And so that is going to tell you how everything is going. So it takes about 2 minutes to set up. It just takes one DNS record to show that you own the domain. And so setting that up then will give you some insights about how your sending is being perceived by inbox service providers. I mean, in this instance, Gmail, but that's going to be able to be extrapolated to all inbox providers. So really, it takes 2 minutes. It's going to give you a lot of insight, especially onto your domain reputation, which is the main component of your deliverability. It's going to tell you if you have any issues that you need to take care of. It's also going to give you something that Google doesn't do, which is report on spam reports. Most inbox service providers, for instance, Outlook or Yahoo, will return to the sender information when somebody complains about the email. Google doesn't, for, and I'm quoting them, privacy reasons, but they're going to do the aggregate for you in Google Postmaster Tools. So really something that takes 2 minutes and should be done as soon as possible, if you haven't already.
So that's helpful. I also didn't know about the GPT thing. That's an interesting frustration point to have to change your acronyms.
Yeah, and you can, because they're not renaming Google Postmaster Tools. Maybe they will. Maybe somebody at Google is listening to us today. If you do, please find a new name for me, please. So I can use acronyms, because I love acronyms, but what can you do?
So, what are the types of things, like once you have it set up, what are the types of like first level insights people get when they first start setting up Google Postmaster Tools? GPT here.
Yeah. So the first one they're going to get immediately is like domain reputation, which is going to tell you. So it's great because it tells you if there is an issue or not. It's not so great because it's not binary, because there's 4 levels. So it's bad, low, medium, high. But maybe you're at medium, but you're right on the verge of being on high. But usually it tells you how everything's going. If you're on high, everything is perfect. Medium, you might have been some issues that are starting to appear that you need to take care of. If you're below, that's when you're going to start deliverability issues. So that's, as support, that's also a super helpful tool for us. That's something that we're going to ask you to share with us. If we see any deliverability issue, for instance, you're like, oh, all my emails are landing in spam. We can go and check and see, if your domain reputation is bad, yeah, probably we found a culprit. We can set you up with a domain recovery plan and help you get back to a high reputation. But if your reputation is good and your emails are still ending in spam, that's probably another issue that we need to be taken care of. So it's a great tool for us and for you, that kind of like gives you a lot of data to make informed decisions about your deliverability and what's going on. So that's the first one. The second one is, spam reports for Gmail, which you won't get into any other sources, and having the kind of like that pulse on how everything is going.
It's actually something I really like about the way our support team works, is like we're willing to get in the weeds with people. And I don't think people understand that. Like just setting up Google Postmaster Tools then allows all the success team to be able to jump in there and actually help you diagnose what's going on and help you fix it. And so that's very much like the attitude we have, is like we're immediately going to get in there. So anyhow, all right, well, let's see. I think Pauline, I mentioned you could go next. So since we'll just stay the same order as we did when we introduced. So Pauline, what do you have to share with us today?
Yeah, one of the things I noticed is some companies and projects ended up with like many lookalike domains. We've all been there. We get super excited about a project. We buy every form of that particular domain. And using multiple versions of that domain is very bad for deliverability. It flags to Google Postmaster or inbox providers that it looks a little spammy. You're not quite sure if this is a right domain and the right brand. So we want to make sure that we're keeping those consistent across the board when we're sending.
Yeah, I actually just talked with somebody on Monday this week who said, hey, we've got our main domain, but we don't want to mess that up. So we bought a domain that's just like it. It was like their domain marketing.com. And I was like, do not use that. That's the idea here is lookalike domains. And again, you want to protect your reputation. And maybe we can talk a little bit more about that later on as far as like why, what you should use. So what would you use instead of a lookalike domain? If you don't want to just like tank your root domain reputation, what else would you use?
I would recommend isolating sending to different subdomains. So maybe you want newsletters to go out through like update dot your base domain, and transactionals to go out like transactional dot your regular domain, example domains or .resend.com. So that would be my recommendation.
That way you get kind of the security of not tanking a whole domain. You could, even if you have deliverability issues, am I right that it typically scopes it to that subdomain, the deliverability issues? And then, if you have trouble with that, you can still be sending successfully with another subdomain.
Yeah, so it isolates the domain record onto that particular subdomain. And you can actually have that data in Google Postmaster. I think JP could probably talk more about the different subdomains and the reputation inside Google Postmaster.
Actually, I wanted to jump in because there is something that I've heard times and times again about, oh, if I use a specific subdomain, that's going to have like a positive impact or not. It doesn't matter. If you want to send t.yourdomain.com for transactional and m.yourdomain.com for marketing, that's fine. If you want to use transactional, it doesn't really matter. And I think sometimes I see people kind of like struggling and being like, oh, am I like shooting myself in the foot by using a specific word or another? It doesn't matter. Fear not, use whatever makes sense to you. I've seen people use a single letter. I've seen people use full names. I've seen people use different things. It doesn't really matter as long as it makes sense and that, a recipient is not going to be surprised by seeing something coming from that domain.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, I think Brian just dropped off, but he was next. So maybe while Brian's gone, we'll jump back to JP unless Brian comes back right now. So JP, why don't you take your next one and then we'll jump back to Brian when he comes.
I think Brian's here. I don't know. Is he?
Yeah.
I'm there here. We go. Okay. Sorry.
All right. I'm back, I think. Sorry about that.
I can hear you at least.
All right. Yeah, I think the one thing that came to mind that I wanted to talk about was testing emails. This is something that we see a bunch where somebody wants to figure out, all right, cool, I have an app that sends 20 emails a day, but what happens if I get listed on Product Hunt or Hacker News and all of a sudden I have to send 2,000 emails? Like, what happens to my application? Am I able to handle that? And how people test that is they will just create like test Gmail addresses like blank.@gmail.com, send 2,000 emails out of the blue out to Gmail, and then it will end up actually hurting their domain reputation for a period of time because Gmail's looking at how much email you're sending from your domain to them. And they can see that there's a huge spike, and then they go, well, there's no one opening these emails. There's no one responding to them. And they can see the engagement's really bad. So then Gmail is going to kind of put you in a penalty box for a while. And when that happens, there's nothing we can do about it because it's Gmail and some sort of machine learning that's happening. And this is for any domain. And so what we recommend instead is we have these test email addresses. So they're like deliverability@resend.dev. And what you can do is you can send to that, and that's like a sinkhole. It won't hurt your domain reputation because it's our domain. We're expecting stuff to go there. And we also allow that the plus suffix that you see a lot of email providers use, where you can do like deliverability plus user 1 plus user 2 and iterate through that. So you can create 1,000 different user email addresses to test that way. And they would trigger webhooks and act like the real thing. So it's a great way to test safely without impacting your domain reputation. And that goes for creating like example.com, or you see people like try and create these fake domains that in their mind are fake, but somebody owns that domain and they have a mail server sitting there. So it can still impact your reputation.
Yeah, that's, I think, two things I want to draw out there. One is it's resend.dev for these test accounts. Recently, I actually was doing an example with the test, and I did resend.com, like delivered at resend.com. That will not work. That's not going to help you out. So it's resend.dev, and we've got an article I'll make sure to link below that'll give you more direction there. How have you seen people use those suffixes intelligently, like with testing certain flows or things like that? Because you can obviously just do user 1 or user 2, but what are some other ways that people can use that and that are useful in testing?
Yeah. So I guess like one aspect that I didn't mention is we also have bounce and spam complaints. So you can also simulate what a bounce and spam complaint looks like. So a bounce is when a mail server rejects your email, and a spam complaint is when a receiving mail server tells you that somebody marked the spam button from the inbox. And so these are good for you to have and monitor when those happen, because maybe you want to know that your emails are bouncing, or maybe you want to know that your emails are getting marked as spam. So that's kind of the best way to do it. And then for the suffix, yeah, it's normally people creating test accounts, right? You maybe have some sort of system and you can't have email addresses duplicated in your testing system. So the suffix allows you to create as many as you need.
All right, JP, I hear you have a hot take. What if we go to you next?
Do I
Take
go
the
with
hot
your
take.
take? I'll keep it. I'll keep it. Best for last. The next tip
Okay.
that I have is something that applies to any sender, regardless if you're using resend or not. It's actually sending from a monitored email address. So I see a lot of people sending from no reply or things like this. First, the no reply usually gets flagged by inbox service providers these days, so I would stray away from this. But also is if you're sending something that's not going to handle any replies, then you get into this issue where you're missing out on responses from your customers, which could be like telling you that the email is invalid, or like the person is in holiday or something like that. And also, people have, I'm getting an email. Sometimes I just like to reply to emails because that's a two-way street, right? And you're kind of like putting like a no entry sign if you use a non-monitored email address or a no reply. And I think that's a bummer that you're missing out on. So I would always recommend using an email that is monitored. You can use a reply to, but the thing is, like, some email clients are like, oh, reply to, guess what? I don't care. I'm not going to use it. So I'm like, you can use that as a intermediary step, but best is to use an email that is actually going to be able to receive emails. If you're like concerned about like having multiple email address to manage or anything, you can use services. I personally use ImprovMX that I really like to just use a domain and create like a catch-all, and so to reroute that email traffic to an address if you're choosing. If you have any kind of like customer service department, I think that's a great kind of like destination for those emails, because your team is used to talk to customers. They're going to be checking that inbox regularly, but also they're going to be able to take action on people surfacing problems and whatnot.
Yeah, that's a great tip. And not only does it connect you more to people, but isn't it true that email service providers will actually check to make sure that like you've got an MX record on the domain? They're not actually going to check if the email inbox is there, though, right? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah. Well, and you have an MX record because you're sending
Right.
from that domain, right?
Yeah. We do have a couple questions here. One of them I think we answered right before Mateus joined, which is, do you believe it's better to have one domain and several subdomains below it, or directly several different domains, which is that lookalike domain? So I think we answered that one, Mateus. Yeah, definitely subdomains. And then the second one was about cold emailing and prospecting. I mentioned in the chat that we don't do that at Resend, but maybe if we could talk a little bit about that. Like, we have people approach us about that. What's our stance on cold emails?
You mean philosophically speaking, or
Sure.
using like an email service provider?
Yeah, philosophically, and or especially with Resend. And any of you can feel free to respond.
Yeah, I mean, philosophically speaking, I mean, if you want to shoot your shot, shoot your shot. And I think that's depends. If you're like, as an individual, I'm sending a cold email to somebody because, I don't know, you want to work at Resend with us and you're just shooting us an email. I mean, like, great, take your chances. I have so many opportunities in my life that sprouted from me just writing somebody me like, hey, I'd like to do something together. I think the problem with cold emails is that you often sit in outbound sales, and that's where you get into like those gray areas, because how did you get those emails? Did you have consent from people to email them? Which, if you haven't, is going to put you in trouble, not just with your sending platform. Resend is going to be like, yeah, we don't allow this, we're going to suspend your account, but it also puts you in trouble. For instance, in the US, you have CAN spam, which is federal regulation from the FTC that's going to come at you. Here in Canada, we have CASL, which is even more stringent and costs like literally millions when they start finding people, and they have fined people every year since they put it out. So there is this kind of like really dangerous area where it's like, do you have consent to reach out to these people? How did you get those email addresses? I sometimes see people being like, oh, but I bought this list, and they feel that, oh, because I paid for it, it's legitimate, where it's like, no, because even if, let's say the person you're buying this list from or this company is like, yeah, people gave us consent to email them. They gave consent to that entity, and that consent doesn't transfer to you when you purchase the company or you purchase the list, because I gave consent to company A, not to company B, C, D, etc. So yeah, philosophically speaking, as an individual, if you want to send emails to people, take your stance yes. As a sender or as like kind of like a outbound sales, prospecting, any kind of like mass sending, please don't do it.
Yeah, that is definitely our stance, and good explanation of kind of both the private, personal, and more public. But yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Can I make one more point on that? So like one place that we see for our audience, right? Like we can oftentimes tell when somebody's cold emailing, but we will see like somebody is like an open source project, and they will go and scrape GitHub of all the contributors of the people that they think would be really interested in their project, because the emails are in the Git commits. Very bad idea. So one, you should not be doing that. But then two, like building on what JP said, then you start running afoul of GitHub's terms of service, right? Where GitHub says that you cannot harvest data from them and use that. And so somebody could take and be like, I received this email from this company. This email is only used for GitHub. It's only used for this project. They took it from this. And then GitHub can come back and now shut down your project. So there's just a lot of risks come with cold email. I think a lot of people will talk about the benefits, but the risks are what we normally see, and they're normally pretty bad. So I just would not recommend it ever.
All right. Well, for time's sake, we should probably move to Pauline. Pauline, you've got another tip for us today.
Yeah. We would recommend avoiding open tracking links for the time being while you're interacting and building your reputation. While it's great to monitor impact on marketing, open tracking can look super suspicious on a transactional email. So why would you track a login email? So that would be one of the tips there.
Yeah, and it is like there is that divide, right? So transactional, you don't want to track. Marketing, it's sometimes okay to track. How does like some of our, both internally and just like Google Postmaster tools and other industry tools, like how would you tell if your click tracking is not helping your reputation, even on marketing emails? Like, is there a time where you wouldn't want to use it for marketing?
I mean, in general, I would say avoid it just because it just lowers reputation. It doesn't look like, so we tack on like a prefix to track the open link, and it can look a little bit suspicious in general because it doesn't look like it's coming from your domain. There are some custom open tracking, but again, it's something that our Google will detect automatically, their AI, machine learning, and figure out that like you're doing something unexpected here. This is not going directly to the link that you have placed in the email itself.
All right. And again, the whole goal here is to look reliable, steady, predictable to inbox providers. So Brian, you've got another tip for us today.
I think Brian froze.
Oh, yeah. Brian froze, so we might have to have JP's hot take.
Do we have the hot
this
take?
This will be fun. Let's do this.
Okay, Brian stays frozen, then all we can do is get a hot take.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's gonna like warm it up, like because it's a hot take is frozen. I don't know. It's about fun. Okay, hot take. I think that's something that I spend. That's kind of like my life fight, right? And it's you most likely you don't need a dedicated IP. This was true 20 years ago. I still see people coming and asking for it. We have a really good article that I co-wrote with our head of deliverability here at Resend that goes you into like the pros and cons. And honestly, there are more cons than pros to having a dedicated IP. So a few things. The first one is inbox service providers, Gmail, Yahoo, Hotmail, etc. They move from IP reputation to domain reputation. This is in their senders guideline. This is everything they've been publicly communicating about. There is no secret. It's out in the open. And the reason is like 20 years ago, most people use their own SMTP servers, and platforms like MailChimp started to appear. And now you have about a bazillion sending platform like Resend, SendGrid, Mailgun, MailChimp, and most people are going to use these platforms. So inbox service providers were like, okay, IPs are going to be shared between people. we shouldn't use that as a strong signal. It's still a signal, but it's very unlikely to be the one that's causing issues, because they're going to be looking at your domain reputation. And so you could have like a great IP reputation, but if you're doing, poor sending, or you're not following best practices, then your domain reputation is going to tank, and regardless of your IP reputation, and you're still going to run into durability issues. And if you want to be on a dedicated IP, sure, nobody can impact your reputation, but also nobody can impact your reputation. So nobody can save you up. Like, nobody's going to bring you down, but nobody is going to lift you up as well. And so I see that coming, I don't want to say on a daily basis, but almost. And most of the time I'm like, I do a lot of education work being like, here's why I'm not sure this is going to be a great idea for you. And 99% of the cases, people learn more and they're like, yeah, sure, let's keep it that way. The reason is, yeah, it's going to take a lot of work. We allow a dedicated IP for you when you have like about 500 emails a day. And that's the threshold, the bare minimum for it to be probably working out. Ideally, you would be sending at a much higher volume. And so I feel like dedicated IP is kind of like dedicated hardware, right? If you know what you're doing, if you have the resources, the knowledge, the expertise, be my guest. You're going to enjoy it. Go build a server, go build a rack, like go do all this. If not, you're much better using like a cloud provider with VPS that's going to kind of like handle a lot of the heavy lifting for you. So yeah, dedicated IP, unless you're sending literally like thousands of emails per day and you know what you're doing and you've been sending emails for a long time, I think you're going to have a bad time using them. And that's why I'm always going to kind of like, I don't want to say push back, but be very intentionally verbalizing, here's all the risks that you will be taking, and here's all the issues that you might run into.
And I did drop the actual blog down below as well. So if you want to check that out, it's not the silver bolt that a lot of people think.
No.
Paulina,
Yeah,
you were going to say something. Sorry.
I just wanted to add to that, like when the volume drops below 500, the dedicated IP kind of becomes useless at that point. So if you have a lot of fluctuations in your email volume, it's probably not a good choice for you. And oftentimes, I've seen people go through the dedicated IP setup process, and then within a couple of months, they will ask us to put us back on the shared IPs, just because owning that reputation is a lot of responsibility. Now your 10 complaint is a huge reputation hit instead of 10 complaint in a pool of 2 million. Now you're at a 10 complaint in a pool of 500. So
Exactly.
Well, Brian came in just in time to finish off his final tip. So Brian, thanks for joining us again. You want to share your final tip and then we'll close off the stream.
Okay. Oh, he's back. You
Now
muted,
he's back,
Brian.
but he's muted. Or at least I can't hear him. All right, we'll let.
Real.
All right. Who would like to take Brian's final tip then?
I can go, Pauline. I've been chatting an awful lot.
Okay, go for Pauline, you want to?
No, JP can go.
Okay. So Brian, latest tip, Brian makes sign if I'm doing something wrong, but it was to set up Apple branded mail. And I think under that, you were encompassing like basically setting avatars or looking at Beamy as well. Yes, not perfect. Awesome. So we have a lot of documentation onto this. And oftentimes people are like, oh, how can I have my logo appear? There are like a few things you can look at. So the easiest is you send from an address that's actually like like I was saying, it's a monitored email. You have it in Google Workspace. You just go and set up an avatar for that, or you use the Gravatar system, as some email clients use it. Then the next best thing is setting up Apple branded email. That takes you through a few steps onto Apple side, and it's going to show beautifully on any Apple devices. So, iPhones, iPads, Macs, using the Apple native mail client. Then the gold summum is using Beamy. Beamy is brand identification something. I lost it. I like acronyms.
Yeah.
I don't always remember what they mean.
I've done
But
a video on it
basically,
before. I'll have to go look at it real fast to tell you what it.
but basically, it's like you take a lot of steps to prove that you own a certain trademark. So it's a long process. I think it takes usually 6 to 12 months to set up. but it not only shows an image, but it kind of like gets you that kind of like, that blue ribbon kind of like verified check mark that looks really good when people receive emails from you. And that's also kind of like also a positive deliverability signal that you're sending on behalf of a brand that you actually own and represent, right? So it doesn't just look good, right? And it's not just vanity, like, oh, I have my logo popping up. It's also like an actual positive signal for inbox service providers. And also just when you look at people behavior and experience with their inbox, they're most likely to click something that has, a logo that looks familiar. Did I do that right, Brian? Nice.
You got the Brian thumbs up. Well,
So
thank you all
it's
so much for
stands
taking the time together to chat through these deliverability tips. Those of you who watch, thanks so much for following along with us live. Let us know if you want us to do this kind of thing in the future. We know that Black Friday is coming up, and a lot of, especially obviously e-commerce people, are connected. Ramp up their sending quite a bit during that time. And so we've considered doing a stream specifically on that, how to kind of get ready for Black Friday as an email sender. So if that's something you're especially interested in, let us know. And but thanks again so much for following along and watching us today. And we'll hopefully catch you in the next one. Thanks, everyone.